Very good evening or good morning to you, wherever you're joining us from, to this joint event with the Harry Edwards Healing Sanctuary and Healing in America. I am Alison McWhinney from the Harry Edwards Healing Sanctuary, and I'm the Director of Development there. For those who have never visited the sanctuary, we're based in the Surrey Hills, just outside Sheer, and in 30 acres of ground that include a labyrinth, a meditation glade, bluebell woods, a rose garden, paddocks, very relaxing place to go and just spend time in nature. We have our own chapel on site, and obviously we offer contact healing, but also offer distant healing by emails and letters, as well as by Zoom and Skype and telephone. We also offer a bereavement support service, both on site, on an individual basis or in groups, and also by telephone or Zoom. And we have our Bluebells Cancer Support Group as well, which brings together people who are living with cancer in a very supportive environment. And the lady who leads that for us is actually on the call this evening. We're very grateful to Stephanie for all the work that you do. Thank you so much for that. We also do a number of events, both on site at the sanctuary and also online as well. And if you like online healing events, we do a couple of free events. On the first of each month, we have Healing Circle, which is at 7:30 p.m. UK time. And then on the second Sunday of each month, we have Healing for You, led by our healers. We're very excited to have been working in partnership with Healing in America for, it must be about a year now, guys, I think, and running these online events. And it's just so exciting and so lovely in equal measures to be able to have and maintain a link with healers in another part of the world and to keep that going. So without further ado, let me give you a very warm welcome to Kim Vincent, who is doing the talk for us this evening and is one of the directors of Healing in America. Over to you, Kim.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And we were talking about, I don't know if you all caught that, that we were in England in April and had the opportunity of going to meet Alison in person and to go to the Harry Edwards Healing Sanctuary, which is just beautiful and such a stunning and healing place. So hopefully we'll be able to do some live events at some time there, maybe. Anyway, so a little bit about me for those of you who don't know me. I have been doing energy healing since I was about 4. My grandmother was also a healer, and so she taught me how to do energy healing in her way. And so I've been putting my hands on people for years and years now. I'm also trained in NLP and hypnotherapy and life coaching. And so I've been doing that 30 years. It seems that this year is very significant for me. We just celebrated 20 years of moving to America this week, actually, the beginning of the week. I've celebrated 30 years this year doing my one-on-one work with people with NLP and things. So a lot of roads coming together. But today we're going to be talking about self-forgiveness. And it's a topic that's really dear to my heart. I think, when we think about forgiveness, we often think about it as accepting what somebody else has done, that we have to come to that place of acceptance or conforming. And my view on it is really, it's about returning to a state of love. So whether we're forgiving other people or whether we're forgiving ourselves, it is really about returning to our state of love and light, really. In my experience, I've seen so many people get really stuck in deep pain from traumatic experiences. And so we're going to be looking today, we'll be talking a little bit about what areas do we tend to harbor those feelings of not forgiving ourselves. right? Because I'm sure I'm not the only one that goes inside and beats myself up sometimes for not saying the right thing or not doing the right thing. And I think we hang on to that. And so we're going to be looking at that. We'll be talking more about that. And we'll also be talking a little bit about the impact. Like, to me, the Native American saying of, you know, what we do in this lifetime has ripple effects for 7 generations in front of us and 7 generations behind us. And so if you're thinking self-forgiveness is a selfish act, think again, because whenever we heal ourselves, of course, the vibration that we hold is much higher and much brighter. And certainly my aim is to bring as much healing to this planet while I'm here as possible. And I know that a lot of you share that with me as well. So we'll be talking about that. I'll be leading you through a self-forgiveness process so that you can start to release yourself and free up some of that energy. So hopefully you've got something that you think, I could do with a little work on this, and it could be a big thing, or it could be something you've said to somebody in passing that you wish you hadn't. So it can be a small thing too. So I'll be leading you through, and then at the end we'll have a chance to have a deeper discussion if you wish to ask any questions, either about the topic or anything to do with healing. And I'd love to invite Alison into that one as well. So without further ado, I'm going to ask that we do just an opening meditation to prepare us to be open to receiving the healing for ourselves and for our planet. So let's take a moment. Let's start by taking in a deep breath and just letting your eyes close. And for those of you who are in the UK, then you will be closing your day. So as you breathe in and then breathe out, let go of the day. For those of us in the States, we'll be taking that breath in, letting go of perhaps yesterday and maybe some of the interactions we've had this morning. Just letting that go so you find yourself in the moment. And our breath is always in the moment. You can't take yesterday's breath or tomorrow's breath. It's always right here, right now. So as we breathe in, we evoke a divine light from the highest source to connect in with us, showering us in light, clearing our auric fields with divine light, allowing us to let go of that which no longer serves us. So as we release that, we let it go. And as we breathe the light in, we breathe in peace, harmony, breathing into those higher levels of consciousness. As we breathe the light in and through our energy centers, so just opening the crown as you breathe light into that, and the third eye, and the throat, and the heart center, and the solar plexus, and the sacral chakra, and the base, letting light flow through each one, all the way through our physical bodies. And then imagining roots, the soles of our feet, going down through the layers of the earth, all the way to the very center. So seeing like a giant crystal there in the center and just wrapping our roots around that, allowing us to be fully connected with Mother Earth. And as we're connected, we can draw more of our divine light into our physical form and into the energy that surrounds us. And so today we connect as a wheel of light. Let us send unconditional love to all beings to the right of us. And let us send unconditional love to all beings to the left of us. Let us send unconditional love to all beings before us. And let us send unconditional love to all beings behind us. Let us send unconditional love to all beings beneath us. And let us send unconditional love to all beings above us. As we together form a wheel of light, a wheel of healing, a wheel of change and transformation, and a wheel of awakening to those higher levels of consciousness, bringing healing and light to our planet and to ourselves. And so if you have an intention for this session, just send the thought out. Just send out those intentions and know that that frequency will be held for you at a high level. And so today we can welcome in guides and angels from the highest levels to connect in so that each one of us receives the healing and the guidance that we need. And as you feel that and experience that, take in a breath and very gently bring your awareness back. Stretching your body if you need to, taking in a deep breath, maybe wiggling your body. If you're in England, you're probably tired, so making sure you're awake. Okay, so I encourage you to ask questions as they come up. If it's a question that might take some time to answer, then I might come back to your question at the end where we've got a bit more time for questions and answers. But please make this relevant to you. We're all in this together, and the consciousness on our planet is shifting. And it requires more of us to be connected to the light and to be working in the light together. And as we do that, of course, we all can awaken. We all can start to create a different way of living here that is better for us as human beings and better for the earth. So self-forgiveness, I've taught forgiveness for years and years, and the healing that can happen from us forgiving other people is extraordinary. But I had this experience last year, the back end of last year, and one of my spiritual teachers, I'd signed up for a retreat he was running, and I signed up. I was probably one of the first ones to sign up. And then I called him like the week before. I hadn't heard anything about the retreat, so I called him up the week before, and he'd forgotten to add my name to the list. And I was really disappointed because it was sold out, and then he didn't have a place for me. So I was really disappointed. So I was practicing my forgiveness on him, and an extraordinary thing happened. And that was as I was giving him the resources, as I was sending him the energy that he needed to heal and, would have made a difference to our interaction, I noticed that the energy was coming through him and towards me. And I thought, that's really interesting. And so I was feeling better and better while I was doing that process. And then the thought came to me, well, I guess whenever we're forgiving other people, there is, of course, our part in something. What have we done to cause it, And we can look at it on many levels. So we could look at it as a karmic interaction. We could look at it as a programmed interaction, right? So there is an aspect within everything, I think, where it does come back to self-healing. What do we need to do for our own healing, for our own forgiveness? And at the moment, I'm seeing a lot of situations where healing is essential and self-forgiveness is essential. And let me give you some examples of that. I work a lot with people that have cancer, and some of them recover and some people don't. It's not their path, it's part of their process to pass. And I was working with this lady who believed that she had influenced her body in some way to get cancer in the first place. And she had a teenage daughter. And while I was working with her, I was working with her doing NLP and hypnotherapy, as well as energy healing. And she had so much guilt because she reached a point where she realized she wasn't going to get better. She was going to pass. And the guilt that she had was extraordinary because she was leaving a teenage daughter behind. So her guilt about, I caused this myself, and then the added guilt of, I am leaving my teenage daughter behind. And she really struggled with that. And so we started to do a self-forgiveness process on that. And she was able to pass peacefully, and her daughter was well taken care of by her family. But I think when we hold those states of non-forgiveness, they really impact us. So has anybody had an experience where you haven't been able to forgive yourself? It's a nod of the head or a show of hands or something. Everybody got something. Let me give you another example. So New Age guilt is something, I mean, I've termed it New Age guilt. Somebody else might call it that. But I think, you know, when we do say people are responsible for their own healing, there is, of course, that is a big thing to give people. And so we need to have the tools to be able to help them through it. Because if we are the creators of our own worlds, then we are ultimately responsible. And I always say that human beings, as human beings, we are programmed. We're programmed by our past experiences. We're programmed by our parents, by our teachers. And guess what? They were programmed by their parents, by their teachers, by their interactions, who were programmed by theirs. And so it goes on. And so until we know how to do something differently, we can't do any better. And the one thing I do love about NLP, there's a presupposition in NLP that says there's no failure, only feedback. And when you think about it, there is no such thing as failure. There is only more information. And yet, I think we run patterns, or certainly a lot of the people that I have the privilege of working with, and myself, we run patterns that sometimes we don't know we're doing until we find ourselves doing it. Like I remember with my children, that I would find exactly the same words coming out my mouth that came out my mother's mouth. And I didn't like them when they came out of hers. And I liked them even less when they came out of mine, right? So I think we are all programmed, and we are not defined by those patterns and programs, because we can change. So they're not our fault. It's not our fault, some of the programs that we're running. And it is our responsibility to heal that within us that doesn't work so well. So to practice things like forgiveness, to practice things like self-forgiveness, so that we can heal and we pass that on, right? So when we take responsibility for our own vibration, for our own lives and the manifestation, then we can come to a place of peace and a place of power very often, and understanding. So people are doing the best they can with what they have. And guess what? That includes you. Not just others, it includes you. And when we are in those situations, so often, you know, social situations, let me come here for a minute. So social situations, you know, have you ever said anything stupid? Anybody here ever said anything stupid and then regretted it? Oh, good, I'm not the only one. And then you kind of come away from that interaction and you replay it. Have you done that? replayed it, then had a little conversation with yourself about it, and then replayed it again, and then felt more guilt or more shame, and keep running that pattern. And then we wonder why we have social anxiety that's so rife right now. And that's one of the reasons why, is because we never practice doing it a different way, right? We think, oh, we should have known better, we should have done it differently. And so we can look at it and say, well, the positive intention of that interaction was so that we'd do something different, but we never practice doing something different. We replay the same thing. Now, if we look at the way the brain works, whenever we're imagining something or we're actually doing something new, the brain lays down neural connections. So it makes connections, it makes links. When we practice over and over again in our minds, that was a bad interaction, I shouldn't have said that. Oh, that was a stupid comment. Oh, I wonder if they're thinking about that. I wonder if they'll speak to me again, right? We play all that. It gets more dramatic and it gets harder wired into our minds. And energetically, that frequency, that vibration becomes more dense in your field, right? I was working with a professional basketball player several years ago, and he came into the office in LA that I was working in, and it was like, hello. It was so tall. But when he came in, he was an up-and-coming star. So the public loved him. It was almost until this point he couldn't have done anything wrong. But he had he'd started to miss free shots. So free shots are where you know, like a free kick in football. I'm realizing I'm speaking two languages, American and English here. So if you don't understand anything, let me know. So he came in because he was having trouble taking free shots. And when we looked at it, what he was doing in his mind was he would get up to take it, he would bounce the ball, he would look at the net, he would imagine the last time he'd missed it, he would feel guilt and shame, and then he would try and throw the ball from there and miss. And then the crowds would boo and he'd feel even worse. So he'd done it enough times that he'd really got himself entrenched into this pattern. When we came time to work with him, it was about teaching him to, one, forgive himself and let it go, and two, how to use his brain in a better way so that he could actually practice what he wanted and not what he didn't. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Another example is another client I was working with who'd lost his job. During COVID, there was a lot of rejiggling in his business, in the company that he was working for, and he'd been made redundant. The trouble was that he had 3 young girls, children, and a wife, and this was the second or third time that it had happened over a 5-year course. Now, none of the times was it his fault or he was inadequate at the job. It was just the way the company went. When I started to work with him, we started to see patterns, and the patterns went back to his father. So his father had lost his job over and over again when he was 8 years old. And he'd witnessed his father do that several times from the age of 8 all the way up until the present day. He's still in that, lost in that cycle, in that pattern. And he realized that that was where it had been downloaded into him. One of his daughters was 8 years old. Amazing, right? So we have with our programs, with our experiences, we get entrenched in them. And I think religion is another one. I've worked with people who don't have the same religious beliefs, necessarily as their parents or their family, or perhaps they have been one religion and grown up as one religion and then left that religion behind. And in some cases, that has meant leaving their families behind as well. Can you imagine the guilt and the shame of that? And so we harbor a lot of those heavier feelings, which stop us, of course, from being able to be, one, at peace with ourselves, and two, plays out in how we create the lives in front of us. Does that make sense? Okay, Ben, has anybody got any questions so far?
I do, Kim, but it can wait. It's kind of something that happened to me as I was taking action and forgiving myself, and then a higher purpose showed up where I could actually help this little girl who was having a terrible reaction to a shot. But the whole process led me, because I instantly went into action, like, oh, I'm angry at myself. I'm angry at this restaurant. They fed me gluten. I was super clear, but I've got to quickly take care of myself. And where I ended up was actually helping to heal and assist in a child healing herself of a panic attack that was a pattern response to a shot, which was totally connected to my gluten. And it was amazing. I mean, it was just the most profound thing, because my purpose was higher, because I was in a process of self-forgiveness, a process of taking care of myself. And it led to this higher plane where I was available and actually helped, given our training, a child in a terrible, terrible moment of pain. And she couldn't hear, her arms were frozen. And then I was able to take her into a place of serenity, and all those things disappeared.
Wonderful.
And then there were witnesses who saw that the energy healing had occurred. And I told her, I said, 20 years from now, you're going to be in college. This is going to be normal.
Yeah.
You people will be doing this as just part of your life. But it's that intersection of purpose that when we get out of that, we choose to not be in that neural net. I could have just stayed there and been pissed at the restaurant and they fed me gluten. I said, no, I have to take care of myself. What does that look like? And even putting on hold this self-forgiveness, I was like furious at myself and for not being more, holding myself accountable. I should have checked it. I knew the guy was an idiot, anyway.
So I can hear all of that chatter there, Devo. Thank you so much for sharing that. And what a great example of all of that chatter, right? That we get stuck in. And then once we transform it, of course, who we are and how we can show up can be so different, right? And then we do feel like we're more on purpose, we're more living a purposeful life as we clear those things out, because we have more space for inspiration, we have more space for healing, there's more space, as well as a different energy to begin to create the new energies that are coming through, because I think we've reached a crisis point. And as we come, we realize actually our own healing is extraordinarily important. And so we need these methods to be able to release ourselves so that we can be better healers. We can, as Devo said, actually help others, right? Which is wonderful. Thank you for that. Any other questions before I go on? Okay, good. So any other points? So we've talked about some areas that, self-forgiveness will often come up. And of course, there are a lot more. And I want to talk a little bit about emotions. And if we are feeling emotions like hatred, anger, jealousy, those are usually about indicating that some forgiveness of others needs to happen. Jealousy could be both. I would do both with that one. And then if we have feelings of shame guilt, sometimes depression actually is like, if we look at it, that part of that state that we get stuck in is when we're not letting go. And it can be that we're not letting go of, you know, something that we've done or said, or our lives not turning out the way we expected it. Like, often that's at the root of depression, is a grieving, a letting go. And so, you know, shame, guilt, self-recrimination, any of that internal chatter that you start to hear where you're giving yourself a hard time, that's a sign now. That's a signal. You might even see a little white flag coming up saying it's time to do your self-forgiveness. So any of those uncomfortable feelings where you can't let go of a way you have been is about self-forgiveness. Is that clear? Okay, good. And does everybody have something that they want to forgive? Self-forgive. Anything you can forgive yourself for. Has everybody got something? I think it's useful when we go through this process. If you've got something that would make a difference, it would make a difference to your life, right? So think about something, and it could be something you that's happened recently. It could be something in your distant past. It could be a pattern that repeats itself. So pick something good and just kind of give me a nod or a thumbs up so I know, okay, I've got something. Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. Let me ask, anybody not got anything? Oh, we can do the self-forgiveness on that if you have. All right, so let's go through this process. I will guide you through. So let's take in a deep breath. And I want you just to notice that as you take in that deep breath, closing your eyes, and this is the world that you live in here. What's it like? Is it a comfortable place? Is it a place you enjoy being? Is there a lot of judgment here? If there's a lot of judgment, there'll be judgment for others, and there'll be judgment for you too. Or is this a peaceful and harmonious place, a place you really want to live, a place you really want to be? Just notice it without trying to change anything in this moment. And then there's that situation that you can't forgive yourself, or you haven't forgiven yourself for. Maybe you've said something, maybe you've done something. And I want you just to pick that one thing. And just imagine it like it's on a screen in front of you. And instead of playing it forwards, we're just going to rewind it. So it's like we're unwinding it back to the beginning. So we're looking at that experience. That's right. Good. Now, as you look at that, we can see that there were some things that you were lacking. Perhaps some resources within you that you didn't have at that point. Maybe it was confidence, maybe it was clarity, maybe it was peace, maybe it was love, maybe it was self-worth. So I want you to imagine that younger you standing in front of you, seeing that younger you there, and just put a shield of light between you and that one in front of you. That as you look at that you can see that younger one. Knowing he or she didn't have what they needed to do something different at the time. And that is all it is. That's all it is. They didn't have what they needed. And so we evoke the divine light of higher consciousness to come down and shine upon that younger you. So that younger you is bathed in light. And as we think about what was it that they needed? So possibly it was love. So we see that you in front of you now in that beam of light, and the color of that light now changes. That light is the color of divine love. And see that younger you filling with this resource. Notice how you're holding your body changes. Maybe the brightness in your eyes changes too. And then ask yourself, what else did that person need? What else did she or he need? Perhaps it was peace. Perhaps it was support. And just see that younger you, see that beam of light now beginning to change color once again. As you fill that younger you with that divine light in its fullness. That's right. Letting that energy flow into that younger you. So beautifully. And then, what else did they need? Perhaps their parents needed some upgrading as well, some updating. And so you might imagine your own parents above you, above that younger you, now filling with everything they needed to be the perfect parents to you. And see that now coming down and filling you, filling them, and then through them filling you. Perhaps you needed safety. And so letting that divine light now change color again as that younger you fills with safety. And you see them there before you, filling, healing. You notice the way they stand, the way they hold their body is different. And you keep sending them all that they needed. And then I always like to add at the end, allowing the divine wisdom to fill you with all that you needed. The light of the divine, filling and healing everything. That's right. Good, good. And then when that is done, in your mind's eye, you can replay that situation one more time, this time in the new way. So how would you behave? How would you look? How would you interact with others now that you have these resources available to you? Notice the difference, perhaps the grace and the harmony and the peace, an authentic connection that you can have with them as you play it through again. And you realize that was all that was needed. And as you look at that younger you, you look into your own younger eyes and you say, I forgive you. And maybe we're not forgiving them for the choices that they made or the way they dealt with something. But what we're forgiving them for is not having what they needed to do something different. And then energetically, we are hooked and connected. So we form these energetic connections with our past. So now, as you scan your physical body, I want you to notice where you have one of those energy connections that you've been holding about yourself in the past. And so I want you to physically go into it. Let's say there's one in your heart. You'd go into your heart and unhook the energy, and with love, hand it back to you. Hand it back to that younger you. And then fill that space with divine love, with light. And then again, where else have you been holding on to the past? Perhaps in your thoughts, you'd imagine reaching into your mind and unhooking that energy. Sometimes I feel a little release when I do that, and handing it back to that younger you, letting them have it back. And then filling your head, filling your brain with divine light, with healing. Good. And I'm going to ask you now to scan your body as much as you need to unhook these, to unhook the energy. And now is a really good time to do that. So if you're in there saying, well, I'll do it later, now's the time. So do an unhooking, unhook that energy. Hand it back with love to that younger you that now has all the resources that they need. That's right. Good. And then, once you're done with that, see that younger you now surrounded in a bubble of light and love. And know that you are so loved in this divinity. You are so loved. And so now, seeing as though we're moving up, above time, I want you to see a line in time, a line that represents your life. From the time you were born, all the way through, long into the future. And see now that younger you surrounded in light, now going back and dropping into that time when you had that experience. And from up here, you can see the ripples of light that echo out through time now, both healing the past and the future. Like throwing a pebble into a clear pond, watch the ripples echo out. The healing. And then let's go float down into that ourselves. So now feel what it feels like to do this, to go through that experience, but now with all of these amazing resources available to you. And as that you fills with them, feel what it feels like. That as you walk now up through time, experiencing the echoes of change that ripple out from this moment out into the future. Let your subconscious mind now update itself with the new ways of dealing with these situations that in the past would have been difficult for you. But now you have what you need. Now you see things flowing harmoniously. As we come up through time to now, being aware of yourself sitting here, us all together in this moment of time. And taking in a deep breath. And as you take in this deep breath, imagine yourself in the future. Perhaps there's a similar circumstance that happens or a similar interaction. But now see yourself reacting to it with all of the grace and the wisdom and the healing that you now have. And isn't it wonderful to be free? And then take a breath, come back to this moment, and breathe in and through your body. And notice also your auric field, for the frequency is now cleared from that too. And fill that space with light. And taking in a deep breath, opening your eyes, coming all the way back to now. Taking a breath, having a little stretch, moving around, feeling what it feels like to perhaps feel a little freer, a little more comfortable, a little more at peace with yourself, I hope. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask about that process? I'll give you a few minutes to come round. So anybody want to share, what did you actually experience while we were going through that process? Anybody?
I just noticed a lot of how I would speak to Danny, my youngest, my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
I was carrying on the family tradition of a very strong tongue from a mother.
Ah,
And
right.
she's 13, very testing.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed a lot of forgiveness on myself,
Mm-hmm.
breaking the family pattern.
Yes.
And then when you said the auric field,
Mm-hmm.
I could sense a lot of white light coming
Brilliant.
through. It was really cool.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And so, now moving forward, you can see that you can begin to have a different relationship with your daughter. Now, she's a teenager, which means that this will be one of those tools you put in your toolbox, because teenagers test us.
Oh, yeah.
I've got two grown-up girls myself, and yeah, those teenagers, it's good to have a few self-forgiveness and forgiveness of others. You're going to need those.
That's what I focused on.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Anybody else want to share their experience or ask a question? All right. Lynn, did you have something you wanted to ask? There, I notice you're unmuted. Oh, I can't hear you. Oh, you're muted, love. Can you unmute? Hello? Still can't hear you. I think you can type it in if you want to ask a question. So, when is going to be a good time for you to practice self-forgiveness, do you think? This is a test question.
I'll say whenever the chatter kind of starts,
That's right.
and I think that one thing I will say, Kim, it's just crazy to me how your voice always puts me into a real meditative state, which, it's amazing. I think because we've worked together in person, but I definitely feel everything that you're saying. But I do think it's important to do this before the chatter goes on too long.
Exactly.
Before it really starts programming, because it can be something that happened weeks ago that you're still thinking about. Why did I do that way?
Exactly.
And so trying to do this before it goes on too long, and kind of stopping the thought process before it gets too much.
Absolutely. I think that is essential, because one, we don't want to keep the pattern going and going out into the future, right, where we keep creating those same situations again. And when we practice it, you know, almost in the moment it happens, we can see, oh, you know, you step back. We've had those kind of interaction where you step back, and I'm a believer in shaking your body to release like trauma and stress. Like it works. And so, you know, giving your body a little shake to kind of, and a couple of deep breaths to bring yourself back into the center, and then doing something that begins to shift it. Because you're right, it takes up so much of our mental energy. Like, has anybody else noticed that? Like, it can really, like when we're really in these places where we're not forgiving ourselves, and, you know, big or small, right? Sometimes it's those tiny things that just play over and over again. It's mad, but that's the way we're programmed. So we have to learn how to move beyond those programs. And then, of course, it gets easier, Galen, as you say, right? Once you've done it, then we move into the future, and it, you know, similar situation happens again, but now we can deal with it differently because we've practiced it.
Absolutely. I think that's key, though, is to not let it go on and on and on, because then it gets bigger too. It keeps getting it gets bigger. And like you said in the beginning, a lot of times it's something really small. Yeah. Maybe sometimes it's not, but a lot of times it's something really small that you just beat yourself up over. And I'm really good at that. So
me too. I'm quite the expert, actually.
Really good.
But yeah, so as quickly as we can get out of that, the better.
Well, and also thinking in a way that you wouldn't be as hard on someone else if they did this maybe as you are on yourself.
Absolutely. People aren't. We are the harshest for sure. Yeah. Great point. Thank you. Thank you. So Lynn, thank you for your message here. I'm sorry your microphone isn't working. So you felt a lot of heat coming through your body as you're doing that process. And that is such a brilliant sign, because actually what's happening is on an energetic level, there is healing and like a dissolving of those energetic patterns that keep us locked. Because remember, we're working not only in our mind, right, with the process, but we're working on our energetic systems as well. Right. And so that's brilliant. As you feel that heat, it often burns through some of the residue or karma or energetic imprints that you've been storing and then repeating. So, you know, as you experience that, that's a great sign. Lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question, Kim.
Yes.
Sorry. I was wondering what is the best way to sort of stop recreating a destructive pattern, you know, that you know, I think, you know, everyone might be familiar with, you know, patterns that we keep recreating over and over again, and for some, how do we get off of that roller coaster or off that track, and how do we stop recreating those patterns that are sort of maybe self-sabotaging? And also my second question was, you know, what is the best sort of technique to help if you get really trauma triggered, if you go right into a trauma trigger where you can't sort of see rationally or see, you know, I was just wondering what your advice would be for that, or what technique to use.
Thank you for your brilliant questions. I think the first one is to practice this. So as when we form neural connections, so we have an experience, what happens in our brain is we're actually forming a neural network in our brain, right? So it's the neurons in our brain actually start wiring together. The more we repeat something, so whether we're actually doing it or whether we're imagining it, those neurons become harder and harder wired. So it's a bit like you have this beautiful field of wheat, and there's not a sign in it, but somebody trumps through the field, right? So then you begin to see a few steps. That might be the first laying down of that network. The more we revisit it, the more hardwired it becomes, until it becomes almost like a highway a motorway for those thought patterns. So we have easy access to it. Now, it does it whether we like them or whether we don't, right? So the fact that we're doing it over and over again is what makes it hardwired, right? So the more we can rewind it, so some of the processes that we use today, rewinding it, right, that starts to loosen it up, because really we watch the videos and we watch them over and over again, and usually we have clips of highlights or lowlights depending on what the situation is, and we play that over and over again. Now when we rewind it, now we're doing something different. When we do the forgiveness, so we start to send out resources, now we're doing something different. Then we play it again with those resources, now it's different, right? Now we're practicing it. Now we're practicing it again. Now we're practicing it again, but in the way that we want it, not in the way we don't. So that is one way of working with your mind that makes it easier, because what fires together wires together. And so with that, we want to make sure that what we're creating internally is what we want and not what we don't want.
Fantastic, right? Thank you.
And then the other, to answer your other question with traumatic memories, you know, traumatic memories, I call them live memories, right? And what I mean by that is that when we have those traumatic experiences, they become hardwired within our nervous system, within our body, and within our energetic system. And when I say live, what I mean is that the memory is very active, and the emotional connection to it, it's almost as though we relive it over again. And so the more we're stuck in that with the active memory, right, because our minds actually sort information in accordance with our emotions, right? So you ever notice when you're feeling down, kind of all those feelings of why life is so terrible comes to mind. But when we're feeling happy, none of those thoughts come up. It's all the good ones. Well, the reason is because our emotions code our memory. And so with trauma, like if it's been trauma that is ongoing, then that is really hardwired within the system. So there's different tools that I would use to work with trauma, to clear and heal trauma. But a simple one, if the trauma is not too desperate where you can actually be present with yourself, then that rewinding it, shaking your body, like shaking for releasing trauma is amazing. So rewinding it and shaking, and then giving yourself resources for when it's activated, what would you need in order to get through that? That's probably the simplest without, you know, going into hours. It would take me hours to explain the whole thing, but that's very simply. So when we start to imagine how we would do something different, we can do it differently.
Thank you, that's so helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina. Okay, there's something. Okay, yes, Devo.
Just a quick question on the what I just am curious. It would seem what you're explaining explains that, in other words, the world seems to be going more towards leading with their heart or heart wisdom, but we're still stuck in believing what our mind is telling us, which is fraught with all this code that's been encoded with emotional resonance, but we are saying, oh, our mind knows better versus trusting our heart. And so I feel like I'm learning through this process to keep surrendering, like the word just surrender from the beginning of this session keeps coming to me. I have to keep surrendering to the wisdom of my heart and trust that will take me. Is
right.
That kind of what the planetary process is? And we're part of that in this, what you're training us?
So look, our hearts get closed up and become harder and harder for us to open when we've experienced trauma and pain, right? So to say that we see the heart and the mind separately, they're not separate, right? The heart and the mind, our energy systems, guess what? They're all connected. And so while yes, right now we're coming more into the space of living as humans from a heart-centered perspective and a heart-centered reality, when we start to heal the mental, emotional patterns within our systems, our hearts can become more open. We become able to hold more love, both for ourselves and for other people, right? So as we go through our own healing, our hearts naturally open. And then, of course, as our hearts open and our vibrations increase, then, of course, that has an impact, not just on us, but the people around us, our communities, our planet, the universe, right? Each one of us can do our part. So no matter how small that might seem, in our own self-healing, it is an act of service. It is an act of love. Thank you. Anybody else have any more questions or anything? I noticed we've gone past the hour, Alison. Sorry about that.
Only just slightly. And we did start a few minutes late, so that's not a problem at all. I think there are just two things that I would like to mention, and people can think of questions maybe while I'm talking, is that if you would like a recording of this event, please drop me an email, alison.mcquinney@burrowslea.org.uk, and I will send you a copy of the recording. And also just really to say that our next event will be on the 13th of October at the same time. And our subject will be healing into death and dying. And tickets will be available on Eventbrite, and I'll put the link in the chat box here.
Brilliant, thank you.
Moment.
And thank you, Alison, for all your hard work in creating this, in everything that you do. I know you work so hard with everything that you're doing and running. There's a lot of responsibility for you. But I really appreciate all that you do too.
Thank you, and we appreciate what you and Roger do as well, and you know, prepping the talks and everything. You do a lot of hard work as well, so it's a lovely team effort, I think, and it's lovely that we can work as a team when we're so far apart geographically.
It feels wonderful. Yes, yes, exactly. The world becomes smaller.
And on totally different time zones.
I know. See, we can do it. Yes, yes. So thank you. And thank each one of you for showing up today and for being willing to open your hearts to do some healing, to do some deeper healing for yourselves. And hopefully that will impact not only you, but the people around you as well. Keep me posted. I'd love to hear your stories of using some of these methods and seeing what you create in your life, because that's really where the magic happens.
Does anybody have any further questions or comments at all before we close?
I would just love to, sorry, I didn't quite catch your email address, Alison, and if you could write it in the chat, that's I can, and I'd also love, Kim, I'd also love to contact you about having one-to-one coaching if that's possible. So
yes,
could you put your details on as well?
I will. Here it comes.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. It is so brilliant now. Since COVID, I am doing more and more work online, and I love it because I get to work with people all over the world, which is brilliant. Exactly.
I think I'd also mention that both organisations have regular newsletters, and for Harry Edwards Healing Sanctuary, you can sign up to our newsletter via our website. Right at the bottom of the first page, there's a little box where you can put in your email address and click OK. And you will then get an email into your inbox asking you to confirm the link. And then you're up and running and signed to our monthly newsletter where we highlight all the events going on at the sanctuary. Is there something on your website as well, Kim? for Healing in America?
Rog, are you still on?
Yeah, so so we have a weekly newsletter, and to sign up for that, again, you can go to our website, which is healinginamerica.com, or you can just email myself or Kim. As Kim put her email up, just send it to Kim at Changes Happen, and we'll make sure you go onto the list. Happy to do that.
I thoroughly recommend Healing in America newsletters. I love every Tuesday when those land in my box, and they have some lovely sort of thoughts on different subjects that I always find very inspirational. So thank you for that. I thoroughly recommend signing up to them.
Rog does a brilliant job.
Okay, I will stop the recording now.